What is it that makes an archaeological find incredible? That's an impossible question to answer because it depends on the discovery. We could be talking about something very small, something tiny, something only a few 100 years old, or something that dates back to the dawn of humanity. We only know an archaeological find is incredible when we see it, and you'll see some fantastic ones in this video. The islands of Indonesia haven't been explored by archaeologists quite as thoroughly as they ought to have that. Because of that, there's still much we don't know about some of the ancient sites on the island. As an example, let's look at the megalithic site of Annika laying on the island of Soma. The island is covered in megalithic tombs, but Annika Lang is the most striking of all the sites there. It's noted for the unusual carvings etched onto the sides of its many monuments. If the carvings have meanings, we've never been able to decipher them. Scientists have never been able to determine how old the site is, which adds to the sense of mystery here. The style and complexity of the graves strongly suggest that they're post-Neolithic, but that's as much as we're able to say. If radiocarbon tests were to be performed on the human remains here, that had solved the riddle, but no such tests have been performed. The Annika Lang people still live on the island today, and their king is happy to tell an oral version of their history to tourists. Speaking of complex ancient sites, here's the Cunha Monarch Complex and Morali, India. There are countless important ancient monuments within the complex, including the famous Iron Pillar of Delhi, which never rests. The most famous monument at the site is the Victory Tower, named for the religious icon Sufi Saint Quadrakutmuddin Bakht Dr. Kochi, who was a mystic and scholar of the 12th century. The tower took almost 200 years to build, with work completed in 1368. For several centuries, it was traditional for the rulers who controlled the areas to add monuments of their own to the complex. Even the bread sat in a few buildings during the time of the British Raj. Aside from the Iron Pillar and the Victory Tower, other structures have noted the Cunha Minar complex include the Ali Darwaza Gate, the Ali Minar and the Kuwait Islamize, which was assembled from the broken remains of no fewer than 27 former Hindu and Jain temples. The entire complex now belongs to the Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage, which restores and maintains as many monuments as it can and also arranges the annual Cute, a festival of art and music. The Arcisata treasure is so named because it was found close to the town of Arcisate in northern Italy in the year 1900. It's a hoard of high-quality Roman silver, and is considered to be among the best discoveries of its kind because of the completeness of the set and the standard of the craftsmanship that went into making it, along with the fact that it's so well preserved. It could almost be mistaken for new silverware, despite being around 2,100 years old. History doesn't record the name of the person who found the treasure, but the finder sold it to a man named Adolf Roger, who almost immediately sold it to the British Museum. It's been on display inside the museum in London ever since. The complete hoard comprises 5 solid silver objects, namely a jug, a strainer, a ladle, a spatula, and a cup. While it might look like a tea service, the set would have been used for both mixing and serving wine, probably in a dining context rather than in religious ceremonies. An inscription on the base of the jug tells us it once belonged to Eutia, daughter of Titus, but sadly neither she nor her father figures known to history. The object referred to in the King James Bible is Jacob's pillow is one of the strangest in the entire text. Genesis 2018 tells us that Jacob woke up every morning and took the stone he used for a pillow, set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it. Why he did this is unclear, but translation and interpretation issues with the King James Bible are common. To add to the confusion, the original Hebrew word used in the text is Marisha, which could just as easily translate as hell or high place as it could the pillow. Meanwhile, the word for pillar is mat, says Bob, which could also mean pyramid. The passage could instead mean that Jacob woke up, took the stone he used as an altar and placed it on top of a hill to pour oil on top of it before brute claiming it to be a place of God. In fact, that interpretation makes more sense. Not least because it's precisely what many Hindus do with lingams in India. Each morning stones like the Hampi, Shiva Lingam are basted with oils and then venerated as part of a ceremony known as the Vishya Kala Puja. As much as the Jewish and Christian priesthood might not want to believe that the traditions described in the Old Testament are similar to beliefs held by ancient Hindus, the similarities are there for all to see. For more than 1,000 years, Pachard Comac in Peru was one of the most important religious complexes in South America. You could scarcely believe that by looking at it today. It's like shares its name with Patrick, the maker of the earth, the god of creation, fire, and earthquakes. As ancient Peruvian deities go, Pachacama is a pretty big deal. The settlement was founded at the end of the 2nd century and included a temple to Pachacama and a giant oracle, which these ancient people believe could help them to predict the future. Until the 7th century, it was strictly a religious center, but it expanded into a full city after the arrival of the Watari culture in the mid-7th century. The Ishmael culture expanded the site even further in the early 12th century after the collapse of Watari society. Pachard Comac was so famous and so revered by 1470, that even the Inca treated it with respect when they conquered the region. They allowed the worship of the deity to continue independently of the Inca's state religion, something they never did in any other territory they took by force. The pyramids and temples of Pachacama were eventually torn down by the Spanish when they arrived in 1533. The Maxi Rustam complex in Iran is a place that contains many ancient mysteries. But few buildings there provoke as much interest as the Kaaba, i.e. Zartaj. The name translates into English as the Cube of Zoroaster. But it's actually a replica of the prison of Solomon in Pasargadae, which was the first capital of the ancient recommended empire. Legend has it that within the structure, there was once a fire that never went out, and that this fire was the source of all similar fires that once burned inside Zoroastrian temples. However, a lack of ventilation inside the company Azar Taj means this is unlikely to have been the case, unless the ancient inhabitants of Nox II Rustum had a means of keeping the flame burning without it. The cube has been studied by countless academics, historians and archaeologists, but there's still no consensus about its true purpose. Almost every expert agrees that it served a religious function, but nobody knows what the religious function was. The structure stands exactly opposite the Muslim of Darius II who ruled 2,400 years ago. So there may be a connection, but it's a connection we can only guess. That it's hard to know what Herodium is, or was just by looking at it. The remains of this ancient fortress, which exists in the occupied parts of the West Bank, look a little like they were carved straight into the mouth of a volcano. That's not quite what happened. Archaeologists think the fortress, which also served as a palace, was built somewhere close to the year 40 BCE, and was established by the biblical figure King Herod. His forces had recently enjoyed a significant military victory in the region, and he wanted to consolidate his position. Amazingly, the entire hill that the ruined fortress sits upon is artificial. Even to this day, it's the highest point in the otherwise featureless desert. The king named the fortress after himself and ordered the construction of a four-towered castle, with a huge courtyard and floors made of elaborate mosaics. Even at a city built at the bottom of the hill purely so people could gaze up at his grand fortress in wonder. When Roman forces arrived in the region, they took an instant dislike to it and tore it to pieces in the year 71. There are two names for our next artifact, the Lady of Uruk and the Mask of Warka. Whatever you want to call it, it's an outstanding piece of sculpture and of history. The mask has been confirmed by scientific testing to be 5,100 years old, which makes it one of the earliest known artistic representations of the human face. It's made of carved marble and has been interpreted by historians as a representation of Anata, the Mesopotamian goddess of sex, love and power, although only the mask still exists today. It's likely that it was once mounted on a much larger wooden cult image. However, it's difficult to say for sure, because the Mask of Warka is simply without parallel and its period. We're lucky that the mask still exists at all here in the 2020s. It was looted shortly after the United States of America invaded Iraq in 2003. But was fortuitously recovered and eventually made its way back home, where it now sits in the collection of the National Museum of Iraq. It's possible that it was never intended to be a mask. In my once I've had shows to represent the whites of the eyes and lapis lazuli for pupils. But there's no way to prove that. We're heading back to England now to check out the Winchester Hoard, which was hailed as the first great British archaeological discovery of the 21st century when it was found by amateur metal detectors Kevin Halls in a field in Winchester in late 2000. In truth, this collection of Iron Age gold artifacts would have been an impressive discovery in any century, no matter how early in the century it might have occurred. The inherent value of the hoard is obvious because of its high gold content. But it's a discovery that comes with a mystery. There's no sign of an ancient temple or even an ancient settlement anywhere near the farmer's land where the discovery was made. Without that evidence, we have to conclude that the collection was deliberately carried far from civilization and buried in what would have then been woodland. Presumably whoever buried it wanted to ensure that nobody would ever find it. Perhaps they hid it so well that they were unable to find it themselves. The design of the pieces is typical of that law team style that was popular more than 2,000 years ago and are some of the best examples of their kind. That goes some way to explaining why the total collection has been valued at more than $500,000. The Himalayas are considered by thousands of people to be a spiritual place and an area of divine mystery. Adding to the sense of mystery. They're also the home of the Himalayan towers, also known as the star-shaped towers because of their strange architectural style. Standing over 100 feet tall, legend has it that these towers cannot be knocked down, not even by earthquakes that obstruct the region over the centuries. Their construction style is inconsistent with the surrounding area. And there are puzzlingly few mentions of them in ancient Chinese and Himalayan texts. Attempts to perform carbon dating on them have provided inconsistent results, with estimates of their age ranging from between 500 and 18,100 years, as they're often found in the center of ancient villages. One theory is that they were built by the families who ruled those villages as a demonstration of their wealth and power. That might be a possible motivation, but it doesn't explain how people might have gone about building a complex star-shaped 100-foot-tall tower 1,800 years ago. Why would a practicing Jew have been wearing a seal ring bearing a depiction of the ancient Greek god Apollo 2,000 years ago? That's a question that archaeologists have been wrestling with ever since the ring was discovered posed to the Western Wall in Jerusalem in November 2020. And they're still not sure they have an answer. The telltale sign that the ring belonged to a Jew is the fact that it's made from jasper stone, which is typical of Jewish ring making of its era, as the ring would have been used to stamp official documents. The ring's bearer must have indicated his or her belief in non-Jewish gods every time they used it. That seems almost nonsensical given the known punishments for apostasy. So it's forced historians to come up with a potential explanation. They now believe it might have been acceptable to wear trinkets from another religion as long as they're worn as expressions of what the deity in question stood for, rather than as an expression of belief in them. In the case of Apollo, those things would be success, positivity, and a long and healthy life. Here's hoping the ring's owner had one. Even though tablet computers are relatively recent inventions, we take them for granted today. Our mobile phones are effectively tablet computers, and you might even be using a tablet to watch this video right now. The origin of the idea is far from recent though. You can even say that these ancient wooden notebooks, relics of the Byzantine Empire that were found in Yenikapı, Turkey in 2014, are the equivalent of iPads 1,200 years ago. This well-preserved example was found inside a shipwreck at the Theodosius port and was probably personal possession of the ship's captain. The box opens up to reveal a tablet for making notes using wax and another layer that had space for weights to be inserted and used as an essay balance, thereby providing the captain with a means for weighing gold or other precious objects. To put it another way, the captain can use this tablet to create notes and also perform calculations. Doesn't that sound like the basic function of a computer to you? If you had any gold away, you can still use this remarkable ancient gadget to perform the task today. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications and you will be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.